It started with a sound so sharp it froze the entire room. A hand cut through the air, striking a woman who had done nothing more than sit quietly in her seat. In that moment, every head turned, every eye locked on the victim. She was the wife of one of the most powerful men in the city, a man worth billions. Yet tonight none of that mattered. To the woman who hit her, she was nothing more than a target for contempt, judged only by the color of her skin and the simplicity of her dress. Phones came out, whispers filled the air, and the weight of history hung heavy over the silence that followed. This was not just a slap, it was a statement, a declaration of superiority. But within moments, the attacker would realize her mistake, a mistake so big it would shatter her world. How could one act of arrogance spiral into total humiliation? Celeste never thought her life would look like this. She grew up in a cramped Detroit apartment where every dollar had to stretch and every dream felt too far away. Her mother worked endless hours just to keep food on the table while Celeste focused on her studies, clinging to education as her only way out. Through grit and determination, she earned her degree and became a literacy coordinator, dedicating herself to teaching underprivileged children how to read. For her, worth was never about money. It was about impact, about leaving behind something better than what she had known. 3 years ago, her life shifted. She met Adrian Williams, a man whose name carried weight across boardrooms and headlines. He was tall, commanding, and wealthy beyond imagination, the billionaire founder of a groundbreaking tech company. But what drew him to Celeste wasn't status or glamour. It was the way she spoke with fire about children who had no voice, the way she cared more about lifting others than lifting herself. Against every stereotype, against every expectation, they fell deeply in love. Marriage to Adrian meant entering a new world, a world of gala dinners, charity auctions, and exclusive restaurants where everyone seemed to be watching. Celeste often felt like an outsider, wearing dresses that never seemed expensive enough, offering smiles to people who barely looked at her. But she held on to herself, choosing comfort and authenticity over pretense. Adrian admired that about her. He reminded her often that she belonged wherever he belonged. Yet deep inside, Celeste carried the quiet fear that not everyone would see it that way. On this particular evening, that fear would be tested like never before. They were headed to Spago Beverly Hills, a place known for its celebrity guests and polished image. Adrian, dressed in his tailored suit, exuded the confidence of a man used to commanding rooms. Celeste, in her simple navy dress and flats, carried herself with quiet grace. To her, it was just another night with her husband. But beneath the sparkle of chandeliers and the hum of expensive conversations, something was waiting. She could already feel the stares as they entered the restaurant. Some eyes softened with curiosity, but others sharpened with judgment. It wasn't new to her. She had seen those looks before, the kind that weighed her skin, her clothes, her presence. Still, she sat tall, reminding herself of Adrian's words, "You belong everywhere I belong." What she didn't know was that across the room, someone else had already decided she didn't belong at all. A woman of influence, polished and entitled, studied her with disdain. To this woman, Celeste wasn't a wife or an equal. She was an intruder. And in a matter of minutes, that silent judgment would erupt into an act so cruel, so public, that the entire room would fall silent. Celeste's life had prepared her for battles, but nothing could prepare her for the moment when one stranger's arrogance would ignite a storm that the world would never forget. The evening began like any other dinner. The soft glow of chandeliers bathed Spago Beverly Hills in golden light, reflecting off crystal glasses and polished silverware. Waiters glided between tables with the practiced grace of dancers, their trays carrying dishes that cost more than what some families spent on groceries in a week. The atmosphere was a careful performance of wealth and exclusivity. Celeste tried to focus on the comfort of Adrian's presence as they were seated at their usual table. He was soon called away by an urgent phone call, leaving her alone for just a few minutes. To most diners, this was nothing unusual. But to Celeste, Being left in that room full of watchful eyes felt like stepping onto a stage she never wanted to perform on. Every glance seemed sharper, every whisper seemed louder. She sipped her water quietly, her hands steady, even as her chest tightened. Then she noticed her. A woman across the room dressed in white Chanel, her blonde hair styled to perfection, her jewelry catching the light with every movement. She wasn't simply glancing. She was staring, cold, calculated, and unrelenting. At first, Celeste told herself she was imagining it. But the longer she sat there, the more obvious it became. The woman wasn't just curious. She was dissecting her, layer by layer, with eyes full of judgment. And then, like a predator closing in, the woman rose from her table and walked straight toward Celeste. The sound of her heels echoed against the marble floor. Each step carried the kind of confidence that only comes from a lifetime of entitlement. When she stopped beside Celeste's table, the entire room seemed to quiet. Diners leaned slightly closer to catch what would happen next. "Excuse me," the woman said, her tone dripping with false politeness. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." Her words sliced through Celeste's calm like a blade. A mistake? Celeste looked up, her heart pounding. The woman's eyes ran over her navy dress, her modest flats, her unadorned jewelry. And then came the words that set the entire night on fire. "You don't belong here." The statement wasn't shouted, it wasn't loud, but it was delivered with enough venom to sting every ear within reach. The room reacted instantly. Some diners froze mid-bite. Others exchanged glances. A few pulled out their phones, sensing the possibility of drama. Celeste tried to steady her breathing. "I'm having dinner with my husband," she said softly, her voice even but firm. The woman's laugh rang out, brittle and sharp. "Your husband? Where is he? Conveniently absent?" She turned her head slightly, ensuring. The surrounding tables caught every word. "People like you don't sit at tables like this, not in Beverly Hills." The phrase hung heavy in the air. People like you. It wasn't just about class or money. Everyone in that room knew exactly what she meant. Celeste's cheeks flushed hot, but instead of shrinking back, she held her ground. "I have every right to be here," she said, louder this time, though her voice trembled at the edges. The woman's smile twisted cruelly. "Rights? This isn't about rights. This is about standards. Look at you. That dress looks like it came from a discount rack. Those shoes, laughable. You're out of your depth here, sweetheart." The cruelty hit like a physical blow, but Celeste refused to let her tears fall. She clenched her hands in her lap, summoning strength from every hard moment she'd survived before. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is she?" someone muttered. "What's happening?" another asked. The energy in the restaurant shifted. What had been elegance turned into a theater of cruelty. And then, without warning, the woman revealed her name like a crown. "I'm Patricia Hartwell. My family owns half this city. I know everyone who matters, and none of them would tolerate someone like you disrupting their evening." The name dropped like a stone in water. Some diners nodded knowingly. Others whispered to confirm who she was. But Celeste stayed silent, her dignity the only armor she had left. Patricia leaned closer, her voice now a venomous whisper. "Leave now, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." Celeste could have stood up and walked away. Every instinct told her to escape. But something deeper held her in place, the memory of Adrian's words. "You belong everywhere I belong." "I'm not leaving," Celeste said firmly, her voice quiet but unshakable. And that was the moment Patricia snapped. Her face flushed, with rage, her hand flying up before anyone could react. The slap cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot. The sound of skin meeting skin silenced every conversation. Celeste's head turned with the force, her cheek burned, her ears rang, and for a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The room froze. Forks hovered above plates, Glasses paused mid-sip, and dozens of eyes widened in shock. Patricia stood tall, chest heaving, her hand still raised, as if triumphant. "Maybe now you'll learn your place," she sneered. Gasps rippled across the room. Some diners looked horrified, others too stunned to move. And then, like a spark in dry grass, the whispers began again. "Did she just slap her? Oh my God. I saw everything. This is going online." Celeste touched her cheek, her fingers trembling as she felt the sting. She could taste blood in her mouth, but she refused to let a tear fall. She had been humiliated before, but never like this. Never in front of so many witnesses. Patricia, however, wasn't finished. She turned to the crowd, attempting to spin the moment into her favor. "You all saw how aggressive she was. I had to defend myself. She doesn't belong here." The lie was so bold it stunned even Celeste. But then from across the room a man's voice cut through the tension. "That's not true." She never raised her voice. "You approached her. You attacked her." An elderly diner, silver-haired and dignified, spoke firmly, his words carrying weight. The room stirred with murmurs of agreement. Patricia's confident mask began to crack, but her arrogance wouldn't let her back down. The manager rushed forward, pale and sweating, offering to move Celeste to another section, as if the problem wasn't the assault but her presence. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Still, she stood her ground. "I'm not moving," Celeste said, her voice clear, echoing into the silence. "I was assaulted, and I've done nothing wrong." The room held its breath. Patricia scoffed, doubling down on her entitlement. But just as the tension reached its breaking point, something shifted. The air seemed to change. The whispers turned into silence once again. All eyes moved past Patricia, past Celeste, to the man approaching with slow, deliberate steps. Adrian had returned. His towering figure filled the space, his eyes locked on Patricia with a fury no one dared to challenge. His presence alone charged the air, each step radiating authority and restrained rage. Patricia turned, expecting support, perhaps thinking he would join her in casting Celeste aside. Instead, his voice cut through the silence, low but carrying like thunder. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The words hit Patricia like a blow. Her triumphant smile crumbled, her eyes widening as the reality crashed in. The whispers erupted into gasps and frantic murmurs. "His wife? That's Adrian Williams, the billionaire." Patricia's face drained of color, her posture collapsing as she realized the enormity of her mistake. The woman she thought powerless was anything but. The victim she tried to humiliate was married to one of the most powerful men in the country. And now, every eye in the restaurant was watching, waiting for what would happen next. The storm had only just begun. The room was silent, every breath held in suspension. Celeste's words, fragile yet unyielding, hung in the air like smoke after a fire. "I can't do this anymore." For a heartbeat, it seemed as if the world itself had stopped. Adrian looked at her as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He had fought billion-dollar battles, commanded armies of executives, and bent markets to his will, but nothing had ever shaken him like this moment. Patricia sat back, her smirk trembling, her victory built on cruelty and lies. She thought she had won, that her venom had cracked a love story too pure for her world of shallow masks. But what she didn't understand was that Celeste's exhaustion was not surrender. It was revelation. Celeste turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across the faces of the room. Some avoided her gaze, ashamed. Others watched with pity or curiosity, their phones still recording, hungry for the spectacle. Yet beneath the weight of their stares, Celeste stood taller than she ever had. "You think my worth comes from what I wear or who I married," she said. Her voice clear now, carrying through the heavy air. "But my worth was forged long before I ever stepped into this room. It was born in sacrifice, in survival, in love that cannot be bought. What happened here tonight isn't just about me. It's about every person who has been told they don't belong, who has been judged before they've even spoken. Whispers rippled, but her words rang louder. Patricia shrank, her confidence leaking away as the truth she had tried to bury was exposed for all to see. Adrian stepped forward then, his hand finding Celeste's. The fury that had radiated from him softened, replaced by something deeper, admiration. "You don't have to prove anything," he said softly, "for her alone. Not to them, not to me, not to anyone." But Celeste wasn't speaking just for herself anymore. She was speaking for every scar that racism had carved into her life, for the quiet battles she had fought alone, for the countless others who had been made to feel small in rooms where they had every right to stand tall. The elderly man who had defended her earlier began to clap, slow and steady. His hands trembled, but his voice carried strength. That's the truth we all needed to hear. One by one, other diners joined him. Applause spread like a rising wave, not thunderous but sincere, a quiet acknowledgement that something greater than dinner had just unfolded. Patricia's face crumpled, her mask of superiority gone. Tears smeared her carefully painted image, leaving behind only a hollow reflection of the power she thought she held. She tried to speak, but no words came. The applause was not for her. It never had been. Celeste exhaled deeply, the weight of humiliation still heavy but no longer crushing. She knew this wound would linger. Racism doesn't dissolve under applause. The judgment she faced tonight was not unique. It was a mirror of a society still poisoned by prejudice, where dignity could be stripped away with a look, a word, a slap. But tonight, in this gilded room, she had refused to disappear. Adrian placed his arm around her, guiding her gently but firmly toward the exit. Every step felt like a reclamation. Phones captured their departure, but Celeste no longer cared. Let the world see. Let the world watch a woman stand against cruelty and reclaim her voice. When they reached the door, she paused. The room fell quiet again, waiting. She looked back, not at Patricia, not at the diners, but at every unseen person beyond those walls who had ever been silenced. "This isn't just my story," she said softly but firmly. "It belongs to anyone who has ever been told they're not enough. Remember that what you tolerate becomes what you accept. Tonight I was slapped in public, but how many others are slapped every day in silence?" The doors closed behind her, but her words remained, echoing in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the night unfold. And as you hear this story, you have to ask yourself, if you saw someone's dignity attacked right in front of you, would you stay silent or would you stand? The restaurant's polished elegance had dissolved into something raw and unforgettable. The slap, the lies, the cruel words, they lingered in the air long after the noise had faded. Patricia, once so sure of her power, now sat trembling, her image shattered in front of strangers and cameras alike. Adrian's hand never left Celeste's, steady and firm, but the pain etched on her face could not be hidden. This night was supposed to be another dinner, another quiet evening together. Instead, it became a battle for her dignity. The manager, unsure and stammering, offered apologies, but they felt hollow. He had hesitated when she needed protection most, and that hesitation, Celeste realized, was part of a larger truth. Too often, when racism strikes, silence steps in as its partner. People see, people know, yet they hesitate, afraid to disrupt comfort, afraid to challenge power. Tonight had proved it again. Celeste walked toward the door with Adrian, each step heavier than the last. The stares pressed into her back, not all cruel, not all kind, some ashamed, some curious, some simply entertained. She knew videos of the moment were already spreading beyond these walls. Soon, millions would see her humiliation replayed in clips and headlines. She could not control what people would say, but she could control what she stood for. Just before leaving, she turned back. Her voice was quiet, but it carried farther than she expected, strong enough to still the whispers. What happened tonight is not about money or clothes or even reputation. It is about something deeper. It is about the way this world still measures worth by skin, still assumes who belongs and who does not. And if it can happen to me, married, to one of the most powerful men in this country, imagine how many others it happens to in silence without a single witness. The words cut through the air like truth always does. Unpolished, undeniable. Adrian's eyes glistened with pride, but Celeste wasn't speaking for him. She was speaking for herself, and for every unspoken story that would never make headlines. The elderly man who had defended her earlier nodded, his weathered face soft with respect. A few diners lowered their heads, as if ashamed of their silence, but Patricia could not meet Celeste's gaze. She shrank deeper into her chair, the weight of her own cruelty finally pressing down on her. Celeste turned back toward the exit. The door opened, spilling the cool night air across her burning cheek. Outside, cameras waited, the world eager to consume another scandal. But this was more than scandal. It was a reflection of a wound that still runs deep through society, a wound dressed up in wealth and civility, but never fully healed. As Adrian guided her into the night, Celeste knew the pain would stay. The sting of Patricia's hand would fade, but the deeper wound, the reminder that no amount of love, success, or marriage could shield her from racism, would not vanish. Yet she also knew she had refused to break. She had stood, and in standing, she had become more than a victim. She had become a mirror, forcing others to see the ugliness they tried to ignore. That night, millions would watch the video. Some would dismiss her, others would mock, but many more would feel the weight of what they saw. A woman slapped not just across the face, but across generations of struggle and survival. And as you hear this story, you must ask yourself when you see someone's dignity attacked, when you hear injustice spoken out loud. Will you choose silence, or will you choose to stand?